Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Subnet Show. I'm your host, Gabriel Cardona. And Connor Daly was gracious enough to host last week while I was jet setting around in Berlin at the Avalanche House event. And so he has this week off so he can spend some time with his fiance and have some fun. And so I'm going to be flying it solo today. But as I've said so many times when I'm introducing teammates, out of all the places I've worked in my career, Ava Labs really sets the bar for just the quality of coworkers. We really have just done an absolutely amazing job of building a team of people who are incredibly passionate and bring a lot of skills to the table. And so anybody who's ever, tried to launch a real project knows that perhaps the most challenging thing is building out a team. There's plenty of money out there, there's tons of ideas, but getting a team of people who are competent and hardworking and creative and easy to get along with and all of those things is really the greatest challenge. And so it just sort of never ceases to amaze me how we've done such a great job. I guess that gives credit to the people on our team who find the people for our team. But this last weekend when I was in Berlin, I met for the first time our guest today. And so I saw him give his presentation. I was really impressed. We got along whenever we were chatting, so I figured it would be great to have him join us today, especially while Berlin is fresh in our minds, so we could talk about what happened in Berlin and then talk about what he's been working on. So I would like to introduce today to the Subnet Show, Connor Chevli. And Connor is Hey, what's up? So Connor's title is the senior UI or front-end developer at Ava Labs, and he's been working on all kinds of cool stuff, which we'll hear about today. But welcome to the Subnet Show, dude. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Gabriel. I've been watching your show for a little while, and I'm really happy to be here. I feel honored that you would have asked me to come on today. And I'm not here to replace the other Connor, Connor Daly.
Yes.
Hopefully I could bring something new.
Yeah, I've been waiting. There's 3 Connors now on our team, and I've been waiting for another Gabriel to show up. I'm like, how have I been so fortunate this long to where I've got the name Gabriel on lockdown? So I suspect now that I've mentioned it, yeah, we'll probably hire somebody named Gabriel tomorrow. But yeah, so we met up in Berlin the other day. We were at the Avalanche House at the Tempelhof airport hangar, and there was the E-Berlin Grand Prix, which is a Formula E race. Formula E being the electronic or the non-fossil fuel version of this Formula racing. And of course, as you guys know, when we announced it back in Lisbon, I believe, last September, October, we have a partnership with Andretti for Formula E. And we had a really big announcement the other day where we announced that a new partnership with Porsche, and the tagline being Avalanche Andretti's Formula E will be powered by Porsche from 2023 going forward under a long-term agreement. So that's very, very exciting. I believe there's a Medium post. I'm not entirely positive, but I'm sure there will be soon. So if it's live by the time this goes live on Monday morning, we record this previously in the week and it goes live on Monday, I will for sure share the Medium link in the description box below. So go check that out if you want to know the fine details. But yeah, so the event was incredibly successful. So as I mentioned, we took over the Tempelhof airport hangar on a Friday, and then on a Saturday was the actual the race, and that was a really cool adventure as well. And so for the Avalanche House part, there's actually avalanche.house. The domain is still up. There were 2 different areas. Actually, there were sort of 3 or maybe even 4 different areas. There was a blockchain 101 room, which, as you might imagine, was for the fundamentals, people kind of just on ramping into this world, figuring out what is what. Not incredibly technical, but very user friendly to sort of hold your hand and on ramping into the ecosystem in a nice kind way. And then we also had the developer boot camp room, which was a bit more technical and was tech talks and live coding on the screen. And myself and Connor and Aaron Buchwald, who, as you guys may or may not remember, is the creator of Core ETH, which is our C chain, obviously. We all 3 gave presentations. I was incredibly stoked. I did not see this coming. I had just came back from 3 weeks in Europe after we had the awesome event in Barcelona. And then myself and Connor and Aaron just got a DM from Patrick, and he was like, "Hey guys, there's a big event in Berlin. I want you guys to go if you can. Of course, I would like you guys to go and give a presentation." So that was incredibly awesome. If by any chance you see this, Patrick, thanks, dude. I'm really honored that you would think of me and just have us there representing Avalanche and Ava
Me
Labs.
too. Also very honored. Incredible experience.
Yeah,
and I'm
totally.
also, I'm very happy that we were able to go and speak with the community, help teach users about how they can use Avalanche and building in Web3. Really incredible experience all around.
Yes, and there are more events like that going forward. So we have an absolutely amazing social team and a biz dev team, and there's going to be a lot more in-person events going forward. And they're all, the bar of quality is so incredibly high. If you've been to Lisbon, or if you were in Barcelona, or if you were in Berlin, you know what's up. There's just a lot of love and a lot of focus on having these events be incredibly high quality. And so I look forward to attending as many as I can possibly go to in the future. And to me, the ROI on them, it seems incredibly high to me, because I've been in the blockchain space for a long time, and some chains don't handle the so-called away from keyboard real world so well. And it's something that we at Ava Labs just do so very well in the Avalanche ecosystem. Every event that I have been to, like I mentioned, Lisbon and Barcelona, and now Berlin, are just really incredibly high quality. So for example, in this one, because we have a partnership with Andretti Formula E, at one end of the hangar was actually a go-kart racetrack, which was pretty rad. And were you in Barcelona or Lisbon?
No, I wasn't for either of them, unfortunately. This is my first event.
Yeah, so I guess let's start there. How long have you been with the company, and how did you find out about it?
Well, let me first say that, yes, thank you so much for our marketing team, Jay, Chelsea, everyone around the event planning with Andretti, our team. They are perfection. The event, yes, like I think that we owe it to them to throw incredibly amazing events. But yeah, so I joined Ava Labs back in November. I haven't even been around that long, really, but it feels like I've been on the team much longer. The amount of output that we have and the amount of things that we're always working on is always so exciting, and a lot all at once. So yeah, so it's been a wild ride, and I hope it continues to be, because it's a lot of fun. But yeah, so I'm on the front end team. I'm a senior UI engineer. I have worked on the wallet team also, on some other projects, but then right now I'm currently working for the Explorer team, building out our Subnet EVM Explorer.
Got it. And how did you find out about the opportunity?
For Ava Labs.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually knew Connor Leary, the third Connor, prior to starting, and he's been telling me about it. We'd worked together on some projects in the past, and he'd been telling me about how amazing it was working for Ava Labs for a while. And he finally convinced me to come and interview, and he was right. It's been awesome. So yeah, originally through Connor Leary.
Got it. Connor Leary is also another block star who works at Ava Labs. Again, it's just from the C-suite all the way down. We have an absolute roster of block stars, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, I like Connor a lot. And so there were a couple things we wanted to do here. So my presentation in Berlin was an introduction to Avalanche JS. If you watch this show on the regular, you may know that I maintain Avalanche JS, which is our JavaScript or TypeScript library for interfacing with the Avalanche platform and network. And so I gave a presentation on introduction to Avalanche JS, where at the end, my intention was to give this little demo, which should take about 3 or 4 minutes, depending on how much I speak. And it basically shows how you can spin up a subnet, instantiate an instance of the Avalanche virtual machine, which is, a virtual machine into blockchain. So launch your own blockchain, and then add 5 subnet validators, all using Avalanche JS in about 3 minutes. And so a lot of people have felt incorrectly that they were boxed out from doing some of the sort of more powerful functionality of the Avalanche network, such as launching your own subnets and virtual machines because they were web developers, right? They didn't think they were Golang programmers, so they didn't think they were able to do it. But that's one of the amazing things about Avalanche and Avalanche JS. You can, in fact, do that. I wrote the serialization for it myself. And so that was my demo, but I wasn't able to do it because I was using the house computer and not my personal Mac. So one of the things I wanted to do really quickly is just share my screen and walk through that demo because many people have wanted to see it. It's basically just me running some command line scripts and then going over to Postman and confirming that everything worked. But just as a quick demonstration to show that you can, in fact, launch a subnet, launch a virtual machine, and add some validators. And then I wanted to actually pass the mic to Connor, and he was going to show us some of his slides from his presentation, which was like a front-end workshop. I'll let him give the fine details. And then some other stuff we were kind of just going to pass the mic back and forth organically and see where the conversation takes us, focused mainly around front end and UI in the Web3 space, because that's a very, very exciting and innovative and fast moving space. Does that seem good to you, man?
That sounds great.
Okay, excellent. So then I think I'm just going to share my screen here. Oh yeah, just so everybody knows, we were having a little bit of technical difficulties. Zoom was giving us some funk with audio recording, so we switched over to Google Meeting. So I'm somewhat unfamiliar with this UI, so sort of bear with us as we work this all out. So I'm going to share my screen. And you should be able to see it now. So I am going to jump on over here to my terminal. Please let me know if you don't see this stuff, Connor, or if something starts acting funky. So now I have my terminal open, and you can see we have the Avalanche Network Runner. And the Avalanche Network Runner is akin to Ganache, if you're familiar with using that in the Ethereum ecosystem. And basically, it's our way of spinning up a local network for doing development. And this is an actual Avalanche network. 5 full nodes that'll spin up on your computer, and you can tweak it out and do all kinds of customization to it. This is an incredibly powerful tool. We used to have Avalanche, but that got deprecated, and the Avalanche Network Runner is just way more powerful. So if you ever were using Avalanche and for some reason you've not transferred over yet, or if you're new to the ecosystem, check out the Avalanche Network Runner. Of course, I'll leave the links for all of this stuff in the description box below. It's incredibly powerful. And you can see we have this command here, go run, and then a path to, a path to 5-node network /main.go. So this does what you might imagine. This is going to spin up a 5-node network. So we'll give it 1 second here. And then, so you can see it happened that fast. And it says it's waiting for all nodes to report healthy. But if I jump on over to Postman, I can run is bootstrapped, and it says true. So we're ready to move forward with that. So let me set the stage here with a couple of things. First, we want to say get subnets, and you can see there's only one subnet currently. It's the primary subnet. Next, we want to say get blockchains, and you can see it only reports 2 blockchains. We have the C chain and the X chain, the C chain being an instance of core ETH, and then the X chain being an instance of the Avalanche virtual machine. So again, in our world, we have virtual machines, which are the application level logic of your blockchain, and then we have blockchains, which are instantiated virtual machines. And the way to think about this is like a class in object-oriented programming. So you have a class which describes some type of object, and then you can instantiate that class into as many different instances as you want. And each one of those instances is a logically separate entity from the other ones. And so in our world, we have virtual machines where the application level logic of your blockchain, and then you can instantiate them into as many blockchains as you want. And you can even launch the same virtual machine many different times on a subnet. And so today we're going to be demonstrating the Avalanche virtual machine, which is the AVM. It's the X chain, if you're familiar with our primary subnet. But just keep in mind, as I walk through this, any virtual machine would work. You could use the EVM, you could use Spaces VM, you could use Blob VM, the timestamp VM, something custom which you're working on, that kind of thing. So really quickly, I want to check current validators. There should be none. Pending validators, none. Peers, so I should have 4 peers, because as I mentioned, this is a 5-node network, so you can see I have 4 there. And then I want to get my node ID, which is my node, 1 out of 5. So there's set the stage there. And so now I'm going to jump on over to this tab, and you can see I have create subnet.tx, and there's a couple things I wanted to point out here. Number one, this is creating a keychain that has 4 different keys in it. So one of the points that I talked about in my presentation is that Avalanche JS has 3 areas of functionality. We have the JSON RPC, we have transaction serialization, which we're going to briefly touch on here, and then we have a keychain. So when you fire up your Avalanche Go full node, it has a key store on it as well, and you can create users and do transactions, and you can import and export users to back them up, and that's all good. If you want to do that, that's an easy way to on-ramp into the workflow and ecosystem. We just consider that a bit of an anti-pattern simply because it requires you to have keys out on some full node, which of course is just an attack vector. You know, somebody malicious wants to come along and take out your keys and get access to your funds. So we consider that an anti-pattern. And so that's one of the things that Avalanche JS does. Avalanche JS has its own keychain, and it's the SecP256K1 curve on ECDSA key pairs, which of course is in line with mostly what you see in the cryptocurrency ecosystem. And so you can actually create and sign transactions locally with Avalanche JS, and you can even sign them using something like a Ledger hardware wallet. So this is the preferred way to do this. Currently, we just have it in TypeScript. I'm hoping and I believe that in the future we'll have more and more libraries in many different languages. But currently today we have Avalanche Go for the full node, and we have Avalanche JS, which is TypeScript for a remote client, and it can be server or browser. And so you can see here that I'm creating a keychain with 4 different keys, and there's a couple of things I wanted to point out here. So whenever I am creating but there's 2 different things I'm going to be creating here. I'm going to be creating an AVAX output, right? Because I got to pay the fines. And on the AVAX output, what I'm doing is, where's it at? Oh, right here. So I'm creating an array of 2 addresses. So remember, there's 4 key pairs, right? 0, 1, 2, 3. And so the AVAX output, which is going to be used to pay the fines, is going to be a multi-sig 1 of 2, which you can see right here, and it's going to use key pairs A and B. And then also the way things work in our world is we have this idea of this subnet auth. So anytime you launch a subnet, of course, you need to authorize somebody to be able to make changes to it. So I would like to add a virtual machine. I would like to add subnet validators, that kind of thing. And so you have to sign these control threshold signatures. It's very much akin to doing multi-sig. So if you're familiar with multi-sig, it's that exact same workflow. In fact, we even modeled the API to be exactly the same method name and everything. So if you're familiar with doing multi-sig and Avalanche, it's the exact same workflow to be able to authorize changes to a subnet. And so you can see here's my subnet auth keychain, and it's going to be a 2 of 3. And it's going to be using key pairs B, C, and D. So I just wanted to kind of show how dynamic this can be. We have a keychain that has A, B, C, and D. The AVAX, which is going to be paying the fines, or the fees, I should say, is going to be a 1 of 2, and it's using A and B. And then the subnet auth is going to be a 2 of 3, and it's using B, C, and D. So just kind of give you a sense of what you can do here. So now I'm just going to run this script. And so that was success. And so something just to kind of point out there, that was a success. As fast as you saw that happen, it took a couple seconds. That is immutable and irreversible finality. So, if you're familiar with Nakamoto consensus, you have this idea where you're stacking blocks on top of each other, but there's this notion of a reorg attack where somebody with enough hash power or enough mining power can basically change the order of blocks out from below you and reverse your funds, take your funds, that kind of send it to a different address, that kind of stuff. That idea of a reorg attack does not exist in Avalanche because we have completely immutable and irreversible finality. So we have sub-second finality where your transaction is completely locked down. That's incredibly, incredibly powerful. It's what I keep referring to as a coming of age moment for the blockchain, simply because for 10 years, 11 years, we've been waiting for the technology to mature enough to where it can be used for all of these use cases, such as point of sale, right? You go in and buy, the coffee, the cliche of coffee. In Nakamoto consensus, you have to, in theory, wait while these blocks stack that's not the way merchants think. They're not, their eyes glossed over as soon as you mentioned you have to wait or Nakamoto consensus or whatever. Avalanche doesn't have that. As soon as you scan the transaction and it settles in less than a second, it's good to go. And so that's pretty awesome. I just wanted to point that out. When we get back this success transaction ID, it's successful. So now if we jump on over to Postman, we can say get subnets. And so you can see there's now this subnet. The subnet ID is actually this transaction ID that came through. So that's nice and convenient. And you can see it has a threshold of 2 and 3 control keys. So if you remember, I mentioned it's very much like a multi-sig output where you have a threshold and some control keys, and you have to sign a threshold control signature. So 2 out of these 3 addresses need to sign any transaction which is going to try and make changes to this subnet. So now if we jump on over to get blockchains, you can see we still only have the C chain and the X chain. So the next thing we want to do is we want to create chain. So we have this create chain transaction, and these scripts are all available in the Avalanche.js code base. And then also I will link them in the description box below if you want to dig into this code. So a couple of things, you can see I'm using the same 4 keys. Obviously, I'm exposing private keys to the world, so these are burners. There's not going to be any money on this if anyone wants to go check. And so now what we're doing is we're actually going to create an instance of the Avalanche virtual machine, which, as I mentioned, is our X chain. It's a DAG. It has partial ordering, and it's used for basically creating assets and doing transfers with simple tokens. And this is where Avax, for example, was issued as a fixed cap asset on the X chain. And so you too can spin up your own instance of the AVM. And I just wanted to be super clear about this. Again, it doesn't have to be the Avalanche virtual machine. You could use the EVM or the Spaces VM or the Blob VM or the Timestamp VM. Any VM would work in this workflow. I just wanted to use the Avalanche virtual machine because I think everybody is used to seeing EVM stuff in our ecosystem, and I kind of wanted to remind people that it's not just EVM, it's anything you want. So a couple things to point out here is that this adds signature index. So this is me consuming, I'm getting all the UTXOs for this address, and I'm looping over them, and I'm adding a signature index. And so again, it's the same API, which I'll show you down here, is for doing subnet auth. And this basically just adds a signature index to this input and says, this address is signing for this particular key. And so if I jump on over, by the way, if you have any questions or comments, Connor, just cut me off at any moment. So feel free to dive in if you have thoughts. Here again, you can remember whenever we're looking at this subnet control auth, you have 3 addresses and 2 of them have to sign. This exact same data structure is what exists for multi-sig as well. So whenever you see this add signature index, I'm saying, imagine this was not control auth. Imagine this was the multi-sig output. I'm saying this address, which is the first in this array of addresses here at the top, this address is signing for, where is that? Right here. This address is signing for the 0 spot. So again, if you jump over the 0 spot being the first one because it's 0 indexed. So I'm saying this address is signing for this particular spot in the control threshold signatures. And later when we sign this, if you were to dig into the code on this sign method, what it does is it loops over each one of the inputs, and then it signs, it gets the key from the keychain and it signs at that particular spot. And then whenever we push it out to the full node will actually validate that this is all legit and good to go. And if it is, as you might imagine, the UTXO will then be spent. And if it's not, the full node will complain. And so it's the same exact API I mentioned, add signature index. You can literally see here, we're signing an input, and down here, we're signing the create chain transaction with the exact same API. So if you are familiar at all with doing multi-sig transactions on Avalanche, then you can also do control threshold signatures for updating your subnet. It's the exact same API. So you should feel incredibly empowered to just immediately make this happen. And so now I'm, as I mentioned, the Avax that's paying the fee is at 1 of 2. So I only need to add 1 signature index. And then the control threshold signature for updating the subnet is a 2 of 3. So I have to do 2 out of those 3 addresses. And you can see I'm launching my own instance of the AVM with, it's called Epic AVM, and it's got feature extensions. So one of the cool things about our AVM is that it's extendable with this idea of feature extensions. So out of the box, we have SecP256K1 assets. So that's like if you want to create your own variable or fixed cap asset. We also have NFTs, which are not compatible with ERC 721 or 1155. They're more like a collectible type model, but you can in fact launch NFTs on the X chain. And then we also have this property feature extension, which allows you to add key value pairs to an address. So that would allow you to do something like saying every single address on my subnet has to have a corresponding some type of license. For example, if you were doing like a super locked down financial application, you had to confirm that all of the different validators or addresses were within a certain legal jurisdiction or something like that. You could do that using the property feature extension. And so now I'm going to go ahead and...
What kind of data shapes, what kind of data structures are supported in that value for the property FX?
I believe it's relatively flat. I think it's just key values. I don't think you can do all the really nested stuff, but I'm not entirely sure on that because it hasn't got a ton of spotlight. I don't know anybody at all who's using it actually in production. I don't even know that people are super aware of it because we've not shined the light on it. I just have always thought it was cool. So again, the same way I'm using AVM instead of the EVM here, I like to throw in the property extension because I just think it's another amazing thing on our platform that perhaps people are not aware of. So, okay, you can see I ran that and it says it was successful. And so now if I go over to Postman and I say get blockchains, you can see, voila, now we have a third blockchain. It's the Epic AVM. You can see the subnet ID is YKR. It's the same subnet that we just launched. So that shows you that I was able to sign the 1 of 2 multi-sig and spin the AVAX. So that's one cool thing. We did multi-sig there. And then I was also able to sign the 2 out of 3 control threshold signature to update a subnet. So that just kind of demos that it's all working and good to go. And so then the last thing I wanted to do is we have this add subnet validator transaction, which I will open. And there's a couple changes I want to make here real quick. So again, the same keys for A, B, C, and D. Everything is the same. So there's a couple things I need to change. Number one, we add the nodes to the subnet as validators one at a time. So we're going to need to run the script 5 times. And so I'll need to update this node ID 5 different times and save it and run the script, which we'll see. And then we have an end time and a start time and an end time. So one of the prerequisites to having your own subnet is that you have to have a node which is validating the primary subnet. So that's sort of like the hard rule. You have to stake 2,000 AVAX, and then you have to validate the primary subnet. And so whenever you spin up your own custom subnet and you launch a validator, okay, let me roll that back a little bit. Whenever you're validating the primary subnet, you have to validate for a minimum of 2 weeks and a maximum of 1 year. And so whenever you spin up your own subnet and you launch validators onto it, their start and end time has to be a subset of the amount of time that you're validating the primary subnet. So for example, if your primary subnet validation is 6 months, then you can't validate a subnet for 7 months. So you have to do less than 6 months. So a couple things I want to change here real quick. I want to have the end date be in 2 weeks. So let's just set that there. And then I want to have the start date be in 10 minutes. That'll give me enough time to where I'm confident that this will, I'll be able to add all 5 of them, because whenever you go over here to get pending validators, they'll be pending until that start time ends, and then they'll become current validators. So by setting it for 10 minutes in the future, this ensures that I can sort of talk and make sure that all 5 happen. So first I'm going to add myself. So I go to info.getNodeID and I run that. And this is my node's node ID. So I just change that. Now let's run this. Add subnet validator transaction. And so you can see it was successful. And now when I go over here and I say, give me pending validators, we see that there's 1. And so now what I want to do is I want to go to my peers. As I mentioned, there should be 4 of them. And I'm going to add each one of them individually by just copying the node ID string, saving it, running it. And it's successful. Jumping over here and grabbing my next peer, jumping here, saving it, running it. Successful. 2 more. Bear with me. Thank you for your patience, everybody. Grab this string, jump on over, change it, save it, rerun it. And then one more, jump on over here, get my last peer, copy it, paste it, save it, rerun it. And it is a success. And now when I come over here to Postman and I say get pending validators, you'll see I now have 5 pending validators. And in 10 minutes, whenever that start time timestamp passes, I would be able to go to current validators and I would confirm that it was working there. Obviously, it's not there yet because it hasn't been 10 minutes. So really, I just kind of wanted to give that demo to show everybody that you can very quickly spin up your own subnet, do multi-sig, do control threshold signatures. You can then very quickly instantiate an instance of the Avalanche virtual machine, but as I mentioned, it can be any virtual machine, and then you can just add subnet validators to it. So without me talking, it takes right around 3 minutes to work through that workflow. So, it's incredibly empowering for web developers. You don't have to be a Golang developer. You don't have to be a Rust developer. You can use your TypeScript skills, your JavaScript skills, and you can launch your own subnets. You can launch your own virtual machines. And we really do see this world where there's going to be thousands and thousands of these public and private subnets all emerging into this global marketplace, which we call the Internet of Finance. And it's incredibly empowering, incredibly powerful and exciting. 2022, 2023, this is the time of the subnet. So I encourage you to go check out this stuff. As I mentioned, the links will all be in the description box below. So thank you for sitting through that. I appreciate it. Now I want
Thank you. That was a really, I learned a lot.
Okay.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I got to see how multisig works. I haven't seen how that works totally under the hood yet. I got to learn a little bit about Avalanche.js some more. That I use Avalanche.js sometimes just to get more information about blockchain subnets, but haven't used it to quite that level. So that was definitely educational.
Yeah, Avalanche.js is an incredibly high quality code base. It's written in TypeScript. It's very idiomatic and modern. We have great test coverage. Anytime we add new code, we always have associated tests. As I mentioned, it's just very, very modern code base. I'm a huge TypeScript advocate. I even mentioned it in my presentation the other day. To me, so types are making their way into the ECMAScript standards body. I just saw the other day there was a huge milestone, but it's still going to be a little while before that all fleshes out. And in the meantime, if you're creating and dealing with value-bearing assets, and presumably you are, if you're working in the cryptocurrency space, you really should be using something like optional types. It allows you to think about your APIs and your abstractions so much more clearly. It catches errors for you. TypeScript is just an absolute win. I'm a huge fan. If you're using
even just the autofill, when you're building apps, if you just declare a type, then all of a sudden everywhere that you see a random variable, you know exactly what the data shape is.
And the developer tooling will catch errors for you, right? So if you're using code, it'll tell you, oh, this doesn't match something that's in another file or something like that. Again, on-ramping from JavaScript into TypeScript is, an afternoon's worth of work. Basically, you got to figure out some build steps and blah, blah, blah. But you should do it. Please, please, please take my advice on this. If you're dealing with value-bearing assets in the cryptocurrency space, take the afternoon to learn how to use TypeScript. It'll change your entire workflow and the way you see and think about code. It was a one-way door for me a few years ago. I stepped through, and I can't even work with JavaScript now. It seems so primitive to me. So, although I love Brandon Ike, so if you see this, Brandon, you're the man. No hate. So, okay, so now I think I want to pass the mic over to Connor, and he's going to give us his presentation from the other day, and then we'll kind of just see where it goes from there. Go for it, dude.
Sounds good. Thanks, Gabriel. And I'm also a huge TypeScript fan. I had no idea. I had no idea how to use TypeScript before I joined Ava Labs, and then I picked it up because I was finally convinced to just give it a shot. And it is a one-way street. It's like you don't go back to JavaScript after you pick up TypeScript. It's just so much better. I'm very happy I made that move. But speaking of front-end tools, I'm going to give a little talk about web development in Web3 and what that looks like. I'll just share my screen. I'll give you guys a secret. It's not that different from Web 2 overall. I will highlight some of the differences that do exist. But if you're a Web 2 developer, don't feel scared about building in Web3. It's not that different. It's just a slightly different type of API that you interact with. And I'll also talk a little bit about different user experience practices and some of the tools that you'll need, but we can get into it. I guess real quick, I think most people watching this show, if they're learning about subnets, they know about what Web 1 and Web 2 are, as well as Web 3. But high level, Web 1, read-only static content sites. You just go and you see data on a page. Web 2 becomes much more interactive. This is like Facebook, Twitter, and Google as it is today. You send a tweet that goes to a centralized service, gets stored and redistributed, and then is displayed to users elsewhere. But it's highly interactive. Much of it is built in JavaScript nowadays, and everything is in a centralized service. Web3 comes along, and all of a sudden you're interacting with decentralized services, something called a RPC, a remote procedure call. That's how you interact with a lot of these APIs that are on nodes on a blockchain. So when you're hitting an RPC, you're actually communicating directly with a node that is validating, or maybe not validating, but it lives on a blockchain and getting data directly from that chain. Some of the benefits of it is that it's fully decentralized. The data that you have, you don't have to trust anyone that data is accurate, because the data is public and it's verified across nodes across the network. It's also verifiable, so meaning I could prove that I own certain assets using cryptography, using blockchain. And again, I don't have to trust any services to do that. It's kind of anonymous. At least everything that exists internally within the blockchain is anonymous, meaning all tokens are stored in anonymous hashes. And then it's also, one really cool thing is pay per use in a way. So you actually pay exactly the amount that you use the chain with something called gas. So if I send a transaction, the amount of computing power that I'm using is exactly paid for with gas. I don't have to pay, $30 a month for a subscription fee to only use it one time. And those are some of the benefits. Obviously, Avalanche is a Web3 based platform. You'll also notice, you'll also find MetaMask, which is a really popular browser extension wallet. Ethereum, Chicken, these are some NFT projects. IPFS, which is really interesting. It's just a way of storing data on a chain and being able to access that data remotely.
With the coolest name ever, right? With the absolute coolest name of all time, Interplanetary File System.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the tools that you can use when you're building for Web3? Because I kind of, just shared what building for Web3 is really cool. It's the bee's knees nowadays. But how do you do it? JavaScript, TypeScript, again, HTML, CSS, just typical front-end development school tools. And this is for front-end development. There are other things that you need to use when you're building Web3 in other aspects, as far as contract development. You would use Solidity, Go if you're actually building the chain. But for front-end development, just normal JavaScript and TypeScript, HTML, CSS. Then you're also going to want a front-end framework or library. React is my tool of choice. However, Angular, Vue, Svelte, any of the other ones that exist that are popular are also great choices. React also has some good React-specific libraries that can be helpful. There's a hooks library that lives around Web3, the Web3.js library, which is useful. So I recommend React, although any of them work. And then those are really the tools that you use. And then there's a few other things that I want to talk about too, as far as developing. When you're building in Web3, you want to build around the EVM most of the time. So Avalanche.js is amazing, and it's really powerful for integrating with the Avalanche PX chains. You can do amazing things that you can't do typically with some Web3 based libraries based around EVMs. However, when you're building for an app, our C chain, for example, which is the most of the activity that lives on Avalanche is on the C chain. The C chain is an EVM, and that means that it's compatible. It's running the same virtual machine as Ethereum, L2s like Polygon, Terra, a lot of other chains are using EVMs. And that means when you're building a web app for Ethereum or an EVM, you're also building it for all of these other chains out there. So it makes it really easy to scale. And then the RPCs, I mentioned these, but these are the APIs that you're going to be using to integrate in Web3. And then there's a few libraries that are pretty popular. Window.Ethereum, this isn't necessarily a library, but it's actually a global set by browser extension wallets. Ethers.js and Web3.js are really popular libraries for wrapping around RPCs and communicating with the chain in that way. I'll talk a little bit about those libraries too, and these tools. So I started talking about RPCs. Some of the data that you actually get back from RPCs is pretty low level. They're really powerful in that you can communicate directly with the chain, but oftentimes the data that you do get back is not exactly catered to building in the front end. And I can talk a little bit about ways of getting around that and improving that workflow. And it's also mostly good for just viewing a snapshot of the data. It's mostly good for just seeing a specific transaction or a specific balance that a wallet might hold. So like, I want to see exactly how much wrapped AVAX, which is an ERC20, that this wallet address holds. I can use an RPC for that. But it's not so great at getting aggregated data. For example, if I want to look at the average gas price over time, can't really do that very well with RPCs. In cases like that, you often need to use an index database. So what those do is they actually go, when you're creating an index database, you're essentially going block by block, transaction by transaction on the blockchain, and seeing what data exists for each transaction and processing it and storing it in some third party, probably Web2 based database, just to make the data more accessible and easier. So you can see more aggregate metrics, you can search across the data easier, and get a better view of that. There are some, easy to use solutions out there. The graph is one. Basically, it's just a way of indexing a EVM-based chain and creating a GraphQL API off of it. So that's a really popular one. It doesn't always solve all the indexing needs that you have, but if you're looking for a good out-of-the-box solution, that would be one I would point you towards.
What are some others? I know Covalent exists. What is a Covalent and the Graph are the two that I know.
Yeah, those are honestly the two that I know too. I've heard of others. Haven't actually used other ones. I've used those two specifically.
I just want to give a shout out to Covalent. I love those guys.
Yeah, we love them too. Over on the front end team. So most of the time when you're building on the front end in Web3, you're actually going to build for a browser extension wallet. So like if you want to send a transaction, you need to approve that in the button with the browser extension. So you can use window.ethereum, which is that global created, to check the status of which chain or network is selected. And you can listen for changes that the user makes for what their settings are in that wallet. And you can use that global to interact directly with the RPCs for sending, signing, things like that. This is kind of what some data looks like. You'll notice that the data we would get back is hex. It's not exactly, this is a number for 53935. I'm just trying to get the chain ID. So again, RPCs are pretty low level data, not exactly catered towards the front end audience, the front end use case, but still powerful. You can still get the data you need. Ethers.js and Web3.js are also wrappers around RPCs. They have some really cool features like big number handling, which I'll talk about in a minute. They give you the data in a little bit better format. And they're just a convenience wrapping layer around RPC calls. They give you something called an RPC provider, which you can use to interact with the RPCs pretty easily. This is an example of what a request might look like if you're using Ethers. So these objects right here, these are big numbers. Well, what I'm doing is I'm just trying to get some transaction data. These objects are big number objects. Ethers.js uses a library called BNJS to process and hold big numbers. And this is actually another tool that you're going to find yourself using in Web3, because most of the apps that we build are financial applications, and we have to have extremely precise numerical precision. But anyways, JavaScript can't really natively handle some numbers properly. I'll talk about that in a second. So big numbers are the way to go with that. All the data is in hex, so it's not exactly catered to a front end usage, but in this data down here, like who knows what's in there. But again, it's just like still a good way of getting data. It's the easiest way to get data from the front end if you're not indexing. However, sometimes there are cases where the RPCs, sometimes it's just good to wrap around RPCs, build a wrapper in some way. You can have an SDK, an API, get the logic for working with RPCs, push it to the side, make it so that all your Web3 development is in one place, because you're going to have to deal with stuff like this. Here, I'm just trying to so this is getting the transaction receipt, which is a little bit different than getting the transaction, just some different data that it gives you. And I'm just trying to show the amount of transfers. So each transaction can have multiple transfers that happen within that transaction. And the logs, which is value, this is some, an array of logs that we can get for an RPC or for a transaction receipt. This data can turn into this, minus the names. That's not on there, but you have to do a separate call for that. But like I can get this from this, but you really have to know that, the details of how to use this data, and it's that is documented in places. So shoving this in a corner and getting all that logic out of your front end code for the most part is definitely a good move most of the time. I'm not going to get into the details of how you actually parse this. It's it's a little complex. So back to the big numbers. This is one case where JavaScript just can't handle numbers properly. I'm just trying to add 2.55 100,000 times over and over, and it comes out with this imprecise number 254999. But what you could use is you could use these big number libraries. This happens just because JavaScript can't handle certain size numbers that it needs to process, especially with floats like this. But big number libraries, what they do is they convert those numbers into hex strings internally, and it allows you to do mathematical manipulation that is much more precise. So this does the same thing. This is using Big.js, and we're able to have a precise output doing the exact same thing as over here. There's a few different big number libraries that are out there. I personally love to use Big.js. However, they all have their pros and cons. These are the two really, the two most important features. Floating point support, meaning like I can give it 2.55 and have it give me back 2.55 very easily without having to do any extra stuff. So Big.js, big number JS, these will support it. BNJS doesn't, but you do want to use BNJS sometimes because Ethers.js, one of the most popular front-end libraries, does use BN. So it makes it a little bit easier to integrate. Another benefit of using BN is that it supports hex, meaning I can just give it a hex value and it'll be able to store that right away, which often isn't actually that useful. However, when you're interacting with RPCs, a lot of the data that you do get is in hex, so it makes it pretty easy to just use out of the box. Personally, I think that the floating point support is more valuable, so I prefer Big.js. I'm going to talk a little bit about the specifics of some specific tools that can be helpful that maybe are a little more esoteric. And I talked a little bit earlier about how I can get the specific balance that a wallet holds for a single contract. But if I wanted to get many, if I want to get many different contract balances within a wallet, I would have to do each an RPC call individually, say like 40 calls, 50 calls. If I wanted to do one with 100 contracts, 100, ERC20 tokens that are stored within that wallet, I would have to do 100 calls, and I could actually get that down into many less by using something called a JSON RPC batch provider. But basically, all it does is it aggregates multiple calls into a single call and makes the call that way and gives you a list of data in a response. This only has a 40 call limit. However, there are other options. For example, multi-call. Multi-call is actually a smart contract deployed to EVM blockchains. And what that does is it allows you to call a method on that contract with many different RPC calls and have it aggregate those calls internally, which is really cool. This doesn't actually have a limit like a 40 call limit or any limit that I've run into in the same way that batching does. And it's a little bit more performant as far as I've seen. So I really prefer using this. However, the limitation of it is that you actually have to have this smart contract and you need to know what the address is, but it has to be deployed to whatever EVM chain you're using.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I didn't know about that. That sounds pretty rad.
Yeah, it's something I found out about like in the last couple of months. It's really powerful. Also, there's a JSLib, I forgot to mention, so you don't even have to worry about that interface with the contract. You can just use the JSLib and it does it all for you. So I've kind of highlighted this a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit about how you can actually build your Web3 based applications and what are some good practices overall. And really what it comes down to is just separating this RPC logic and putting it into a corner of your app, where you don't have to work with it all the time. Your front end apps should be dumb. Make them as dumb as possible. So ideally get this logic into an API of some sort. If you can't do that, put it into an SDK or in a corner of your app where it's all in one place. So that way 90% of the development that you're doing is just typical day-to-day front-end development that you would normally be doing with, Web 2. It's just, usually you just need to worry about a different type of data. However, using a different type of API is what the Web 3 part is, and that can just go in one place. Also, really valuable is to build off of index data when you can, because getting that abstraction layer in place, because RPCs are pretty low-level data, and getting that abstraction layer in place makes it a lot easier to use the data and get it formatted in a way that you could just send the data to the front end, and the front end can use it right away. I also wanted to talk really briefly about, well, actually, Gabriel, did you have any questions before I kind of get into like some UI practices?
No, I'm following along. I'm enjoying this. This is awesome.
Cool. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about what UI development looks like, or rather, what are some good practices in building UI for Web3? Here's Curve. This app looks interesting, right? It's very old school, retro style. However, you wouldn't see a modern banking application that looks like this today. A lot of Web3 based applications are very dev focused, are very power user focused, and not necessarily built towards, with the focus of creating a really powerful, easy, secure user experience in mind. Kind of like this one, like this wouldn't necessarily pass today, and with most, modern apps that are being built. And Curve is an extremely popular dApp, by the way. This is like one of the most popular Ethereum swap liquidity pool applications out there. So again, like instead, make your app look like really nice. Focus on your UI in the same ways that you do with Web 2. Like there are certain things with Web 3 that you need to focus on, like as far as like showing your balance in the top right. This is Spaces, which is an app that I built with Cohen Carpentier back in January. But this is based off of a Spaces blockchain, which lives on a subnet actually.
You built this?
Yeah, we built it.
Oh, nice, dude. I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Nice.
I hope Cohen can come back onto the show sometime soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we built this, but just really focusing on just building a really pretty application is important. In the same way with Web 2, but also when you're the Web 3 part, you have to really think about that as well. So like, show which wallet you're connected to. How much balance is there? I actually don't have any balance in my current wallet, but also when you're actually going to submit transactions, it's important to like think about what the data that you're actually submitting to those signatures is, because you have to click that approve button in your wallet, or that confirm button. If this is the data that you're sending to get signed, then what are users have no idea what they're doing. They don't feel safe doing this. Instead, do something a little bit more, there's even some like ways that this could be improved. Like we're including the block ID, which is something that normally people don't really care about. But Spaces, the way that this app works is you can actually you can save a space, like really cool space. And then you can claim it. I actually don't have any spaces in this account, but I'll go to a space, and then you can store stuff in that space, and like you can save files or just text or images in there. But this is like the signature for actually claiming a space.
Which really quickly, I think this is deceptively simple, but it's incredibly powerful. I think that we're going to see people build stuff on this Spaces VM in the future, because you can basically store these hierarchical key value data structures, but I don't think they have to be flat. As far as I understand, they can be sort of multidimensional. And so I think that we've yet to see all the amazing stuff that people are going to do with Spaces.
Definitely. You can store a lot in Spaces, like really any file type, like PNG, JPEG, like whatever. You can use it for NFTs, or you could use it as like a new type of IPFS if you wanted to, or something along those lines. There's a lot of different use cases. So this and Blob VM are going to be really powerful in the future, which is another file storage type of VM that we came out with. I just built the front end for this, so I was focusing on that. I know a lot of Patrick, for example, was working on the back end, built Patrick O'Grady, building Spaces VM. But yeah, just like get some, useful information for users in your signature. This could even be improved, but that's pretty much it. Just like really focus on your users. Like also when you're signing a transaction, let them know in the UI that you're waiting on some input in the browser extension. Let them know, give them constant updates. Like for example, if you're building a bridge, that's a transaction that could take minutes or hours to complete sometimes. make sure users know where their money is at all times, because they're, some people have their life savings in this. And really right now it's like we're living in a world where you have dApps, one dApp here and one dApp there, and users are sending money all around and they don't really feel safe. It's not like it's definitely not an environment that feels safe and secure. And making sure the user experience can stay in one place and that they can see their funds at all times is something that will be really important in Web3 moving forward, I think. That's pretty much it. I certainly have more I could speak about, but don't want to take up too much time today.
No, this is great. I'm really enjoying listening to you talk. This is very informative. So, yeah, I think I would just sort of echo the sentiment that UX is really the play here. We have this amazing technology. We're building the internet of finance. I've said it a million times, and I believe it, or I wouldn't say it, and I wouldn't work as hard as I do. We're building something which is going to have an impact for generations, akin to the ladies and gentlemen who built the DARPANET in the late 60s or the TCP/IP stack in the early 70s. It's been 50 years since they've done their work. And arguably, their work is having a greater impact today than it ever has, because the web just continues to be more and more ubiquitous and have a greater and greater impact on our lives. And the blockchain has the potential to do for finances what the web did for information, and that is basically make it ubiquitous and democratized. And so it's an incredibly powerful paradigm, and we barely scratched the surface. And I really do believe that our work is going to resonate for generations. So one of the tasks that we have to do is user experience, because of course not everybody in the world is a power user. And by the time this goes mainstream, people won't even be, in many cases, people won't even be aware that they're using the blockchain, because it'll have been abstracted away by 10 different layers. And so the opportunity and the challenge is to wrap this up in a user experience that is just so smooth that people don't even have to know that they're using something like the blockchain. And so I just really do want to echo what Connor is saying, is that, the opportunity is user experience, and the opportunity is design. I often try and, inspire or nudge non-engineers into our world, because I think the blockchain is sort of notoriously engineering heavy, and because it is, there's a lot going on. It's like a multifaceted jewel, and there are many, many different faces to it. But we need more designers. We need more user experience people. We need the people now as we go mainstream, because it's clear to me that the blockchain is now mainstream. I've been in this industry since 2011, so I've seen many, many different things come and go. And as I said earlier, there's this coming of age moment, which is happening right now with Avalanche Consensus. Avalanche is huge. I wouldn't be here on this team working as hard as I do every day if I didn't believe Avalanche. The very first time I heard about Avalanche in 2018, when I was in Milan, and I was at a Bitcoin Cash technical meeting in Milan, and Kevin and Goon woke up at 3 or 4 or 5 a.m. in Ithaca time and gave us a presentation on using Avalanche Consensus for pre and post consensus in a Nakamoto consensus world, because they were pitching us as as Bitcoin Cash folks. I got it immediately. Like, if the light went off as soon as I understood sub-second immutable and irreversible finality, say no more. Thousands of transactions per second that settle instantly. Well, I mean, come on, man. That's what we've been chasing for years and years, and now it exists. And so now, and the zeitgeist, there's been a lot of things that have happened over the past year, from Elon with Dogecoin and so many other things, which have really, Bitcoin being accepted as a national currency in certain South American countries. The blockchain feels mainstream to me now. So, if you know about an adoption bell curve, you have like the innovators, the early adopters, mainstream, slow adopters, and then like the laggards. We're now entering the big part of the bell curve where we're going mainstream with this. And so the opportunities simply exist for people to come to show up right now and wrap this in just a beautiful, smooth user experience, in the same way that the Macintosh took everybody from command line into GUI, which, there was this Xerox PARC machine which came before the Macintosh. So credit to the amazing people who did the work that deserve the credit. But, Mac sort of gets the public credit for it. But we're living in that moment right now. So we're going from command line utilities into GUIs. And so the people who come along and have the best GUIs and speak this language in a very intuitive way are the ones who are going to have a huge impact. And so massive props to Connor and our entire front-end team. I'll say it again, Ava Labs is absolutely amazing. Blockstars from the C-level suites all the way down the org chart. And we've just got some really great guys and gals who are focused on making this user experience absolutely smooth. And we're going to see more of that when the core wallet launches. And we've already seen that in a bunch in our bridge. The bridge UI is absolutely beautiful and shows exactly what's happening. As Connor mentioned, you need to know where your funds are at all times because people have their life savings here and you really want to not have them stress out. And our bridge does a really great job of that. And we're going to see more of that going forward. So yeah, massive props for that presentation. Thank you. I appreciate that.
No, thank you. I hope it was helpful to some people out there. And yeah, I think that I agree with you. We're reaching that phase where really thinking about user experience is going to what it drives user adoption. Where all of a sudden we're trying to break through and all of a sudden not have power users, people that we're not going to have everyone that's super familiar with blockchain using our apps. And we're going to start building around a competition or an atmosphere where user experience is a priority and making users feel safe is a priority. And I hope that's the direction we move forward. I hope that in a few years, you won't even know that you're using a Web3 based application.
Sure.
And I also think that Avalanche will be absolutely huge in a few years. So looking forward to that time. I hope that we're the ones that build that. I think that, that's something that we're really focusing on. And we're making great strides to get there.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, yeah, so I think that was it. I mean, I think we both managed to pull off what we wanted to pull off. Is there anything else you want to plug or give shout outs to your team or, where can people find you online?
Yeah, my name is Connor Chevli. You can find my LinkedIn, I guess.
Whatever you want us to share, we'll put in the description box below. So
yeah, LinkedIn will probably be easiest.
Do you do social? Are you on Twitter or Instagram or anything?
I am on Twitter. I most recently am on Twitter.
What's your handle?
1 second, let me check. I'm not a super big Twitter poster, but
you're gonna get some followers after this. Everybody go follow him as soon as we know. Again, I'll paste it in the description box, so just in case you want to say it, so for our audio listeners.
Yeah, I'll link that there. That's probably the best place to reach me. Just reach my Twitter. I'll start tweeting some more often.
His name, Connor Chevli, one word.
Yep.
You want to spell it for us?
Yep, that's CONNORCHEVLI.
All one word, no spaces, no.
All one word.
It's one word.
Yep.
Yeah, go follow Connor for more alpha on amazing Web3 user experience. Any shout outs?
Yeah, shout out to Cohen, incredible friend developer that he really led development on the Spaces project. I worked very closely with him on it. Also, we built the Subnet Explorer, which I would also go check it out. It's an explorer that you can use to see all of our subnet EVMs. What's that?
You want to share your screen? Show us.
Yeah, sure.
Because I know one of the things we've been working on at Ava Labs is getting all of the core components in place to allow people to very quickly spin up their own subnets. One of those incredibly critical pieces of infrastructure is the Subnet Explorer, which we're seeing now. You want to explain?
Yeah, exactly. So the Subnet Explorer is where you can go to verify that transactions are happening on the chain. You can use it to see what your balances are. Basically, any activity that lives on chain, you can see in the Subnet Explorer. It'll also be a place where you can, view contracts and their code, look at the logs for transactions. It's a very, this is a very much in the details, in the weeds of the blockchain data type of tool. So this is the homepage. Just high level, you can see. So this is DeFi Kingdom's DFK chain. DFK chain is a blockchain that launched around the DeFi Kingdom's DeFi game. It launched roughly a month ago, not too long ago. But this is the first production level Avalanche subnet, and since then we've had many others launch. So it's starting to gain popularity, and we're spinning up explorers very easily for all of them. But in this explorer, you can look at all the transactions. Literally, you can look at the blocks that are happening, what's going to a specific transaction. So here, this is someone bridging, just sending a transaction to the Synapse bridge to do something with their money. It looks like they're bridging XJewel or something like that. But really, you need to know details of what these different metrics mean. But we do provide descriptions for everything if you are looking to go in and check it out. you can look at all the details of anything that's happening in that transaction. If I want to go to like some wallet address, like let's check out, this guy's address. We can see this guy holds 7 ERC20s. He has 106 Joule, his balance, look at his transaction history. If it was a smart contract, like let's look in this one. This is a token, so you can look at all the transfers that are happening for that token. But this is another, I think I might be rate limited. Actually, I've been spamming this today. Yeah, I'm rate limited. CoinGecko. This is all CoinGecko. But you can look at like contract bytecode. We're actually working on improving this, so soon it'll be much better. But that's what this is. Just like really, it's an engineering tool for the chain.
Is it React? What did you build this with?
Yes, this is React. Our component library is built with Material UI. At least it's an extension of Material UI, which we love because it lets us build really, really quickly. And build, not even worry about things like accessibility, but have it just working out of the box. Those are, the two primary libraries that we're using, React, Material UI. Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Well, yeah, thanks for joining us, man. You have an open invitation. If you ever want to join us again or you got something you want to plug, obviously just let me know, let Connor know, and you can join us anytime. It's really been a pleasure working with you. I'm glad we got to connect in Berlin. Yet another block star on the Ava Labs team. So it's great to finally connect with you in person. And yeah, man, it's been a joy working together so far. Looking forward to what we do next.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Happy to meet you on last weekend in Berlin. Awesome opportunity to meet each other too. That was a blast, and I look forward to watching your shows every week. So, thanks for having me on here. Really, I'm honored.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So, as you guys know, I'm Gabriel Cardona. If you've made it this far, you're an absolute champion. As I mentioned, Connor is off this week, but he'll be back next week. If you want to find me on social, you can go to CG Cardona. That's Cardona, CG Cardona. You can find me on Twitter, so go out there and follow me on Twitter or connect with me. You can also connect with me on Telegram through the same handle. If you're not yet subscribed to the Subnet Show, please, of course, subscribe and click the bell and all those things. Help us spread it. We've been getting steady growth, and so I just want to express gratitude to everybody who's taken the time to be a part of this journey with us. It's been amazing, and we've just got so much cool stuff lined up. We're just really well positioned in this ecosystem. We know a lot of people, and so we've got a lot of great interviews lined up going forward and just lots of great content. I myself have been brainstorming on some other different potential I don't know if we're going to launch other shows necessarily. It will be part of the Subnet Show, but just other ways we can do than just the interview format. So, trying to just think of other ways that we can really help people deep dive into subnets, because there's no question about it. Subnets are incredibly transformative. Avalanche is huge. It's absolutely huge. It's the project that I myself have been training for 10 years. I really believe that. All of my previous work on all my blockchain stuff, my entire blockchain journey has led me to Avalanche. And I really do believe that Avalanche is the one that's going to go really, really big. And so it's been an absolute amazing journey so far, and looking forward to what comes next. But as usual, we will be back next week, same time and the same channel. And as always, from Snowflake to Avalanche and through consensus to the stars. Thanks, you guys. See you next week.
See you, everyone.